Welcome back to Bread and Butter, where we're serving up the basics for Hearthstone Improvement. This is episode 164, and as always, I am joined by Pylet. Pylet, how are you today?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, and semi-always joining us is Worldeight. Worldeight, how are you?
Good. I was about to say, shouldn't I get an as always now too?
Pretty darn close,
You
Pretty
haven't
close.
on as many recent episodes as I have been now, so.
All right, creeping in on the territory there.
Actually, I wonder if Worldeight's been on. Worldeight's been on more as a guest than you were on a guest before you were part of the show, I think, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, Mr. 8, what have you been doing inside of Hearthstone lately?
Well, inside of Hearthstone, probably much to your chagrin, Tito, is I've been playing a lot of Egglock again. I took a long break. I took a break from Standard, pretty much like a week after the expansion launched. I was just not only with like Imbue Druid was like a really strong deck, but it was everywhere. And even if I felt like I had some kind of deck that was favorable into it, it was just I didn't want to play this against the same matchup, like every game. So I went into Wild. That's where I retreat when I don't like Standard. Wild's in a really good place right now. There's one or two really strong decks, but even then, people go to Wild to kind of like play a whole bunch of stuff that they can't play in Standard. So pretty diverse field, which is nice. And end of the month, I hit Legend with my own Beast Druid Cook. I think I've mentioned this on the show before, but it features all the stuff from like that Stormwind, Fractured and Alterac Valley, year with like the Oracle of Loons and the Frost Matriarchs, stuff like that. I was really happy with the list. But now that the patch is here, there's a little bit more breathing room. A lot of people are experimenting, at least the last few days. And so I'm kind of going back to that Herald Warlock, if that makes it any more palatable to you, Tito, for me to call it a Herald deck. And my list, though, is about eight cards different than most other lists. So I've been really fine-tuning this. I have very high confidence in this list. I hit Legend with it pretty quickly after the patch. I've been kind of like hanging 50% on ladder for the last day or two, which has been really frustrating because most of the games I've lost are due to high rolls. Now, I don't want to like say that my opponents weren't playing it skillfully and playing to their outs. Like the level that I'm playing at, people play to their outs, and like good for them. But there's been like a lot of rogues that I've been encountering, and that deck, and there's a lot of randomness. They'll play Sinestra, and I have 2 eggs on board that got lethal, and they rolled 2 cards that deal with the eggs, right? And I'm like, okay, like I had this game on complete lock, and now I lost. So I'm having fun with it though. It's very satisfying to have a deck as a deck builder and be like, all right, I know this deck. I've made some really what I feel like critical changes to the deck. Like, for example, I focused a lot on Animancer. Doing that before. That's still in the deck. But one of the cards that I kind of just I tossed in there as an experiment, I've been very happy with, is the Careful Caretaker, which is a 1-mana 2/2 that restores 3 health to each player at the end of your turn. And that's really strong because the Warlock takes a lot of its own damage. It does a lot of self damage. There's a few ways to gain life, but a lot of the life gain in the format is gone. So you can play like Caretaker on 1, tap on 2, and you're back to 30. While also contesting early board, things like that. So it's one of those situations where I really like the deck. It appeals to me when I have I do like scam decks, right? Like, you remember I played a lot of Drum Druid. This is similar vibes to me, right? Like, big stat bomb on 6, deal with it, and it's really good into Demon Hunter, which is pretty popular right now. Basically the 2 decks that I'm facing against are Rogues and Demon Hunters. A lot of the other stuff at my pocket meta is it's kind of fallen off. You still see some shamans, but a lot of the experimental stuff is gone. Again, mostly rogues, and I'm glad that people are having fun with it. But glad to be back in standard, while still cool. And if I get sick of standard, I know I can always go back to that.
I like having you on Worldeight because a lot of times when we have a new guest on, we'd be like, "So what have you been doing in Hearthstone?" They'd be like, "I've been playing Priest."
Good for
It's
them.
like okay, no, or just whatever. Just like, could you elaborate a little bit? Talk like we're a podcast. Talk. Tell people a little bit about yourselves. What have you been playing? So Pylet, what have you been playing?
I've been playing a lot of different decks. I sent Tito a message yesterday saying I'm so happy with Hearthstone right now, because before rotation I felt like I had like 2 decks that I almost enjoyed. And I have the entire first page of my decks, or decks that I'm fine rotating between and enjoy playing for the most part. A couple of them less so. They're fun when they work and really miserable when they don't. But they're also just styles of decks that I don't naturally draw to. Like Token Druid right now just doesn't have a ton of reload and refill after turn 5. So you run into a priest or a death knight that blows up 3 boards in a row, and you want to delete the deck. And then I had the end of turn or a paladin where I drew everything backwards and didn't do anything for 5 turns in a row. And that was a very, very fun and enjoyable game. And I didn't queue that deck up again. So I know they're good decks, but I need decisions or draw, or both preferably. So I've been playing a lot of the Spell Demon Hunter. Been having success with that when I don't run into King Lane. I know that's a 50-50 matchup. I haven't figured out my 50% of it yet. I've learned the 50% losses really, really well. But all 4 of my losses on that deck are against Rogue. Been enjoying and figuring out the Herald Shaman. I think I get the deck better than my win rate says. I just keep running into a couple high rolls here and there. You run into a rogue that gets Nature's Gift or whatever it is, the new buff spell from Druid off of Sinestra, and they get 14/14 out of nowhere. So been running into some of those. Face Hunter, the no hand hunter, is very, very good and has a lot of it can stay in the game for quite a while. It went up against a control priest earlier that probably healed for 60 throughout the game, and I still won. I did generate an extra confront the Tolvir, which definitely helped. But I didn't really have a ton of damage in it. I didn't find any of my rock skippers. I think I found wound praise, and that was about it. But just enough to kind of stick in the game, and they healed up to full, and then I played it, and they went back down to 2 that turn. So very good deck. Burn Mage I've been really enjoying. I was excited for that deck. I'm glad that deck has turned out to be playable. I'm playing it right now above where the stats are, but it's also just a deck archetype that I am drawn to, and I have a ton of reps on, so I know kind of where to look for the lines in the matchup. And then I'm still enjoying Control Priest, and I don't know what's happened to me, but I've really, really enjoyed that deck. The buffs are, I'm mixed on the buffs so far. Black Blood feels like a legitimate card. That seems really, really good, especially if you've already got one of the Cleansing Cleric buffs down, because then it's a board clear and likely a full heal. And that's very, very good. And then it's sticky enough to where if they don't have a way to clear off the appendages, it just kind of keeps doing its thing. And then it just does a bunch of damage once you get to the late game and ends the game quite quickly. The mirrors are a little goofy. It's a lot of try to turbo draw and get through your deck as quickly as you can, while also knowing it's just like, okay, what's their damage limit? What do I have to watch out for? And it's not overly interesting, but kind of just a very super turbo draw. But been playing mainly those. I got to early Legend this month after getting there the last 3 days of the month, the past 2 seasons. So entered at 230, 250. Been hanging out in the mid to high 200s, swinging back and forth as I test decks for THL. So an enjoyable week of Hearthstone, which I'm glad to have.
Testing decks for THL. That's an interesting concept. Maybe I should think about that. So
You should. You really should.
So you all know it's been said many times on this podcast that I like weird cards that are almost there. I like the bait cards. I like the Rye Cleaver. I like the Black Rock and Roll. I try to make them work, and I usually hate myself for it afterwards. I destroyed my rank last season. I came in pretty high, and I have been trying to make a big druid work. And Azhara's Triumph is my new crack. I love that card. It is so much fun. I've actually had good runs with this deck where I've won like 7 of 10, 8 of 10. I had one run where I had like 11 wins in a row. But overall, in the aggregate, it is not a good deck. I think it's closer. I have a couple different versions of it. I have one version that runs Krona. I have another version that doesn't and tries to run some low, and has a lot more spells to try to like really just get your minions from the Triumph card and try to control the board with like, damage spells and other cards that give you minions and stuff like that. It's not there, but I want it to be there. And even though I haven't had the best winning percentage, I've had a lot of fun with the deck, and I'm still having fun with the deck. So it's been kind of hard to like give it up and play other decks. So this week, I didn't even realize that THL started this week until like Tuesday. So I got a hold of my opponent on Wednesday, and it was like, "Hey, can you play tomorrow?" He's like, "Sure." So Thursday was the balance patch day. So no testing, no nothing. I put together a lineup. I didn't put any bad decks in the lineup, but I didn't put any decks that I really played a lot of. I lost my first 2 games and came back with the reverse sweep. Won my first week in THL. And Pylet's mad because he's like, you didn't even prep. You didn't even try. You just kind of went. And but no, we played pretty well. I brought the No Minion DH, which got banned. It was double No Minion DH that got banned, and I brought the No Hand Hunter. I brought a Dragon Warrior, and what was my third deck? Oh, I brought Token Druid. I brought specifically my version of the Treant Druid that had the Brood Watchers. So that was a deck I had a lot of reps in. Maybe that was the most questionable deck, but that was the deck I felt the most comfortable in without, whatever. So it worked out okay. We won. We're moving on to the next week. I love it. So right now, I think I think Hearthstone is in a good place if you can play a deck that's not winning as much as you would like it to, and you're still having fun. And I think that is good design. And at least for me, and even some of my more negative friends that like are like always complaining about Hearthstone are like, hey, except for the priest, I'm really having fun. It's like, oh, good, But like Azhara's Triumph, this is you're gonna hear the name of that card probably for the next 2 years. I apologize in advance, but I really want it to work. I really want to find something. Worldeight, when you find something that makes that work, I want it. I want it bad. I want it like it. But Mr. 8, what have you been doing outside of Hearthstone?
Oh, well, I'm gonna take the liberty here and talk a little bit more about Hearthstone because I think that is something so satisfying. I don't know, it's just that you can take a deck and really run with it. I mean, that's what Hearthstone is all about for me, is finding a deck, maybe 2 decks that I love, and that's why I keep queuing or I take a break. And it's awesome that you have a deck that you love, and we'll work on it, Tito. I promise. You might not like my cuts, but we'll work on it.
As long as you don't cut Azhara's Triumph,
I promise you, we will not cut it. It could be your Story of Carnassus. I love Story of Carnassus. It's so bad, but I love that card.
It was good until Blackthorn. Blackhorn.
Yeah. Anyway,
I almost took Story of Carnassus off of a Discover today. It was my options were so bad. I'm like, is this the best one? It can't be the best one, right? I don't remember what I picked instead.
Okay. Anyway, back to the show. We've the boys had 2 weeks spring break. They're at private school, So, they kind of compress the spring breaks, which is really great because we can go do stuff. We had a bit of a big trip, about a week, which was really cool. We went out west. We did quite a few things. We have some friends in LA. I haven't seen them 5 years plus. So really great to catch up with them. A lot of my friends have had kids within the 5 to 10 year span. So we went to a brewery, and it was just like all of us catching up and being relaxed, and then our kids being terrors all around the beer garden, and we didn't care. I don't know. We just had this like attitude, like deal with it. Um, they weren't that bad, but we also went to Universal Studios, went to the new Mario Land. It was pretty cool. They only have one ride there, so I wouldn't really particularly recommend that anyone make like a pilgrimage to go see it if you happen to be going to Universal anyway. It's really cool. It's very thematic, um, but it's still kind of Universal Studios. You get what you sign up for, which is some good roller coasters. A lot of people do the studio tour, et cetera, et cetera. But Mario Land was pretty good. And then we went to Sequoia National Park, and then we went down to Joshua Tree National Park. So we did a little bit of hiking, seeing those things, which are both great. I love going to national parks with the family. And then we went to Legoland on our way out through California, and Legoland was amazing. It was just perfect for our boys who are both, between the ages of 3 and 10, and it's just perfect for that age. There are Legos to play everywhere. All the rides are kind of appropriate for that age. There's not really any roller coasters, and there's just like building kits everywhere, right? They have like little zones, and every zone has a playground, and it has like a building area. And our little guy loves playgrounds. He was just in heaven. And they have these big, gigantic foam. They're not even Duplo, right? They're the size of, a loaf of bread, and you can build these big things with them. So yeah, just a great trip. But it's also nice to be back. Traveling with kids is a challenge. So actually coming back to work was like kind of a breath of fresh air, because like these are the problems I know I can handle. Even if people are, a little whiny, you don't have to, deal with them for 12 hours in the day. You can just put them in a box and deal with them for only part of the day. So, but life's been pretty good. But glad to be back.
How about yourself, Pilot? What have you been up to?
Deciding if I need to get a boat to get to work or not, because it's been constantly raining all week here. I think that especially like our county and like our east-west, we've been like the middle of every single storm that comes through every day. We've gotten like 5 inches of rain this week. I was looking earlier, I think that we're like double for March. We had double the high for like severe storm warnings for the month. Like the record was like in the upper 20s, and we hit 50 or something this past month with like 13 tornado warnings. It's just been a weird weather stretch, so hopefully settling down, but I'm tired of looking out and seeing rain every day. Outside of that, I've been doing a lot of bowling as we finish up the season. My league's finished up the past couple weeks, so didn't quite end average wise where I wanted to, but 2 of the 3 leagues my team won, including our Wednesday team, was stacked. It was about halfway through the second half, we kind of looked at each other one day. It's just like, this is like an unfair team, just because of we went on this crazy run. It took like 3 months for us to lose our second point of the second half. It was stupid. But enjoyed that. Pulled our local ally decided to do a city tournament for the league bowlers, so bowled singles, doubles today. Couldn't quite find what I wanted, but about good enough. I'm second in doubles right now, and like 4th in singles or something like that, but it's super early. Last weekend we had our shift for state bowling tournament. I saw what I needed to do. I couldn't execute what I needed to do. So little disappointed with that, little frustrating. compared to last year was frustrating because I had no idea what to do. It was a challenging shot and I couldn't see it, and I just couldn't see what I needed to do to figure it out. This year I saw exactly what I could do. I just physically and mentally couldn't execute it enough. So I left a lot of pins out there, but it was tough. Team was super tough this year to where 2 boards, at my mark, missing 1 board right or 1 board left was about 3 pins difference down by the time I got to the end of the lane. It was super tight and flat and brutal. So it happens. Outside of that, other games I did pick up Slay the Spire 2. Haven't played as much of that as I've wanted to because every time I open it up to play it, I'm tired and I get like half a run in and can't keep my eyes open. But it's good. Slay the Spire 1 was fantastic and it's built on it really nicely. Haven't quite figured out how to play the new characters yet. I feel very, very lost with them, but they did a nice job, I think, of taking the Ironclad and Silent that they brought back and kind of just building on what was good and what was enjoyable with them before, and fine tuning them to the new game. So been enjoying that, and hopefully have more time to play that here soon. And when Hearthstone doesn't have a complete grip on my free time right now.
So some of you might have noticed that we didn't have an episode last week. So last Saturday, I'm walking my dogs, and I get a text from my wife saying there's water in the basement. Now, we're not going to get into everything, but turns out there was a septic issue. Things were backing up. And what should have been a real simple kind of, hey, have someone come out and pump it and whatever, became a 4-day odyssey of pain and torment and digging. And I was in the Army, and I never dug that much in my life. My yard is torn up, not happy. Finally get the issue dealt with. But I could have recorded on Sunday night. This happened on Saturday. This went through Tuesday. I could have recorded on Sunday night, but I'm like, I am going to have zero energy to edit or deal with things afterwards, because it's not just the recording. It's like getting things ready, getting things put out there. So I'm just like, can we skip this week? We were still in the middle of Imbue Druid, and I think it would have just been a lot of people just complaining about Imbue Druid. So we decided, let's just push it off a week. And I don't think we missed too many episodes recently. So I think that's the first episode we've missed in a while. So I was okay with that. But so apologize if you were looking forward to Bread and Butter talking about how much we hated Imbue Druid. But it was just a week, and life happens. Outside of that, spring's finally starting to come. Next week is supposed to be 70. Dealing with, just cleaning up the yard and all that kind of thing. Been playing outside of Hearthstone. I'm still playing a ton of Hades 2. I accidentally, with the wrong trinkets to start and with the wrong fear choices, I completed a 20 fear run south. And if that means nothing to you, that's fine. But one of the options is to not gain health for a run. And it goes either like 75, 25, 0. And I thought what I was selecting was you can't gain more health. Because there's objects that'll say, hey, you have 100 health, now you have 125 health. I thought that's what I was saying no to when I picked those options. But no, it was like, you can't regain health. So I made it I'm like, well, fine, I'm just going to go as far as I can. And I made it to the final area, because it's broken down to like 4 zones, right? Each section is broken down to 4 zones. And I made it to the 4th zone, and I'm like, I have 22 health. I'm like, there's no way I'm going to get through this. So I took the trinket for Arachne, which gives you more armor. And I was like, all right, we're just going to go with this. We're going to just go as far as we can, see what happens. And we got our first 20 fear run. Can't do it north. It is really hard. I got Boomer APM, but the fact that I got a 20 fear run, I was super happy with. So, again, that probably means nothing to you unless you play Hades 2, but I was thrilled. But this is not a Hades 2 podcast yet. This is a Hearthstone podcast. So, Pylet, do we have any news about Hearthstone?
I'm just glad to hear that you read things in Hades as well as you read cards in Hearthstone. So this has come up enough. I've got Tito to add a reading the card, explain the cards button on his stream. It's great. But we do have a lot of news. So we had a patch, as we've talked about, 35.0.3 with about almost 10 changes to standard, nerfs and buffs. So for standard changes, dev comment, well met with Cataclysm now live and standard freshly rotated. We've been closely watching the new standard environment take shape as you experiment with a wide range of decks and strategies. With the meta still evolving, this patch focuses on reining in a few clear outliers and giving a small boost to some budding archetypes. So we'll keep a close eye on how these changes land and look forward to how the playing field continues to develop. And I was pretty happy and not overly surprised with much of what they went after. So we have nerfs, 3 druid nerfs. Hamul got nerfed. It's still a start of game effect. If you have only nature spells in your deck, it'll imbue your hero power. But now it repeats every 3 spells to upgrade it instead of 2. Crystal Spine Cub is now a 1 mana 1/1 instead of 1 mana 1/2. And Wildwood Circle, the Shatter card, is now 3 mana instead of 4. Druid had completely taken over standard with a couple different archetypes, so I don't think anyone is very surprised by these changes. I know when Tito and I are talking, the only card that I was a little surprised that didn't hit was Nature's Gift, just because that's a lot of stats. I thought that it was going to be +1/+1 for every other or go to 3 mana, but I haven't seen that card very much since Druid got axed, so we'll take it.
That card is really good with Wicker Fang. You play Wicker Fang, and then you play one that spell on one of the tentacles. Wicker Fang gains it right away. Tentacle is now bigger, and it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, that card doesn't survive. I don't think it survives this year without getting nerfed. I think that card is going to be nerfed eventually also. Bonkers. Shaman also took a couple nerfs. Skywall Sentinel, which is a 2 mana Herald Elemental, went from a 0/3 to a 0/2, so it can be dealt with a little bit easier on curve. And Flight of the Firehawk still draws 2 minions of different types, but now gives them +1/+1 instead of +2/+2. Herald Shaman was kind of up there with everything else, so it took a light nerf to these. And then for Warrior, Gladiatorial Combat went from 5 mana to 6. The Cassandra Warrior had been, I think it was kind of the second best deck after Imbue Druid as things settled, so it wasn't overly performing, and they figured it would kind of take a hit after the patch, but it was a play pattern that they wanted to knock down a little bit preemptively, so they nerfed that, they said. So
I made a video about that deck, and I got on that deck really early, I think. Normally I'm not like early on these decks, but I got on that really early. And I know it's Barnes. I know people hate Barnes, but it was fun. Actually, I really kind of thought about taking Cassandra out of the deck because I always felt like Cassandra was like the worst options because you wanted to get your the Great Corax, whatever the hell his name is, and the other guy. And I thought about putting in Briarspawn Drake because that's just like a good card to keep getting multiples of as you go. But that deck was fun to play. That got me pretty much to Legend last season, but I have no qualms with them nerfing it. It was Barnes, so, but it was good. Well, Worldeight, what do you think of these nerfs and buffs? Are we talking about the buffs yet? We haven't talked about the buffs yet. What do you think about the nerfs?
Yet. We'll get nerfs first.
All right, so we'll do nerfs. I mean, I think they knew they needed to take down Imbue Druid, and then if that happened, they needed that cascaded to Shaman being like out of control.
Mm-hmm.
So we make, I think the player base sometimes pokes at Team 5 for being like, oh, you missed this obviously really strong deck waiting in the wings. And I think this time they made a concerted effort to address the Shaman. There's an argument that they probably also could have seen Spell DH being really strong. It was a good deck already, but you can't like nerf everything. And I think they also intend to balance these out with buffs, which we'll talk shortly about. But you know, they just gutted Imbue Druid. I mean, 3 nerfs is a lot to eat.
I'm going to disagree with you, Worldeight, because so right now I'm looking right at the stats, and there are 12 tier B decks and 1 tier A deck. Tier A is Egg Warrior. Imbue Druid is still a tier B deck, and I've seen it a few times.
Check
It is
your
still
range there. Double check your range, because I'm seeing something very different.
I'm seeing Legend over the last 3 days.
Okay, so Legend only. Okay.
Yeah, I mean it's still a good deck. So it's not. I mean it's not the best deck to play anymore, and it's not old, but it's still playable. It's still like they didn't kill it like they've done it before. They didn't completely gut it where you can't play it if you like it. There's still a solid deck that's going to win you games, and I like that. But they still hit it hard.
Yeah, and I think it's you know, when you take a look at the aggregate sites, and I don't want to dismiss what you're saying, that you know what you're looking at is HS Replay. You can also look at HS Guru. They're looking at different numbers here, and this is where you know, Zach on Vicious Syndicate takes a lot of pride. He's like, all right, I'm gonna try and remove as much bias as I can from the, you know, Firestone data, and that's really tricky to do. So you know, there's truth here, right? Like there are X amount of games, those games have this many wins, but when you look at like HS Replay, just the sample size is a lot smaller, right? Like you're saying Egg Warrior is the best deck, but there's only 700, you know, I'm looking at it right now, April 4th. There's only 700 games in that. Like 700 games, you know, is a very small sample size. Could be a very good deck. And Imbue Druid might not be completely gone. You know, it's showing good rates on that particular site, but if you go to a different site, right, like if you go to HS Guru, it's showing a below 50% win rate. And if you dig down into the cards, you can kind of see the impact on the nerfs. So obviously Wildwood Circle, it seemed like it was a card that had been preemptively buffed before release because all the other Shatter cards are 4. And it was unusual for this to come out at 3. And it was clearly a power outlier. I think the power of the Shatter cards really surprised most of us. And this, the Wildwood Circle and the Paladin one, both seemed like the easiest ones to activate. And so Druid coming in at 3 just seemed definitely very easy to activate. And one of the halves was just like a good card, right? Soul of Forest was just like, it's totally fine to just play that half. Like you weren't really punished. It was just like it was gravy to get the 2 treants, or sometimes you play the 2 treants, right? So the Humul nerf and the Wildwood Circle nerf both made sense to me. But I thought that was enough. I didn't think they needed to touch Cub. And there's an argument there that Cub was actually one of the best cards in the deck. But I think changing the other 2 might have been enough. Because now Cub is like essentially a bad card, no matter what stat website you look at, and it feels bad to play. It dies to pings. You have to bump it, you know, like 3 health, like 2 health, 3 health. Like each of these health points is pretty significant. Really needed to get Cub up to 4 health as quickly as possible. And that happens effectively a turn later, right? And your opponents are much more likely to deal with it. So I agreed with the Humul nerf to kind of remove like an old deck from the format. I agreed with the Wildwood Circle nerf. That card was just out of control for all the decks that were playing it. But I didn't like the Cub nerf, mostly because it took token Druid out. Like it was, you know, just an unfortunate side effect. So I did not like the Cub nerf, and a lot of people could hate me for that because the Cub was such a strong card. But I say, hey, let's let the format have some strong 1-drops. In terms of the Shaman nerfs, right? Like again, I was a little surprised by the Shaman nerfs. Even though I was kind of like, okay, the the 0-3 was kind of overpowered for what you're paying for it. So that makes sense putting it down to 0-2 because you're protecting your, especially when like you've played the 2-4, you got the 2-4 Herald, like that thing is really good. You're getting great value out of that. Even though it takes a little bit of effort to get there. So that one makes sense. I don't love the Flight of the Firehawk nerf, but I guess it's an old card. It was the next best thing to touch. And they kind of said, okay, Quest Shaman is whatever. But I always liked Flight of the Firehawk because you could use it in decks to like tutor stuff. Like you could have like mostly elementals and then have like Xavius, right? Like something that's non-elemental and kind of use it for tutors. So I thought it was kind of cool, and you can still do that. But it made sense to tone down that deck, and you can see right now that they planned that well because the deck is still strong in this format, and people are still enjoying it. The nerfs didn't. I guess the flight nerf didn't really impact it that much in terms of feels. So, pretty good job overall with the nerfs. I'm just not wild about the Cub nerf.
I completely agree with you about that. And I told Pylet, I believe, on day 2, Pylet, they're going to nerf Cub. And he's like, well, probably not. I'm like, no, they're going to nerf Cub. Because it's not that, I don't think it needed to be nerfed. And I agree with you. Like, right now, token druids and treant druids are paying for the sins of imbue druid. But it's just a feels bad card. If like when it gets rolling, it's a snowbally card, and it really kind of. So I think that's what they were trying to address. I disagree with you about the Firehawk nerf. I think that was a good choice, not because of anything except that if they have a choice between, hey, let's nerf an old card or nerf a new card, if they can nerf an old card and let the new cards stay better, I think that's a better choice for them, because you want the new cards to feel like, hey, they're still relevant and impactful. And if you happen to nerf an old card, I think that's okay. So I don't think it was that egregious, but at the same point, if it helps bring the Power Devil along a little bit, that's fine. In my opinion. What do you think, Pylet?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't see the Firehawk nerf coming before they announced it, but as soon as they announced it, it made sense, and I'm glad that this is they chose to address the stats that it gives rather than adding a mana to it and completely wrecking the curve of a lot of those decks. Because it's still a really good card. I mean, it's still targeted draw 2 with a buff. So that's still much better than a lot of the draw we have in any other class right now. So it's still a good card. Sentinel is still a really good card. It's still 2/4 in stats across 2 bodies on turn 2. Or I guess it's, yeah. So with the attack buff that you're getting from the Herald, so there's solid, just a little bit more manageable. Cub is the one that I agree with the least, just like Worldeight, just because it feels terrible to play now. Like if you play it on 1, you feel like you're wasting turn 1 because it's just going to die. And even if you're on coin and coin something with it, it still dies to most removal on turn 2 as well. So I get the snowball effect. If they wanted to address that, I could have seen like a once per turn so that you couldn't do double buffs with the nutrient. I could have seen that. That way you're not getting +2/+2 in a turn, because sometimes you did funky things with that, or coins or innervates and things like that. That's where the card felt a little bit more offensive, is when you played it and you played it on the coin, you coined out something else, and then you drew your innervate, so you got to go 2-drop innervate, 1-drop, and get, now it's a 3/4 on turn 2. Then it's a little bit much, but make it once per turn if that was the issue. But it just feels like a dead card now. And I think the thing I like least about it was a card that was better sometimes on the coin and let you make up that difference of going second, because you got to play and coin a 1-drop, and you got to swing tempo back and kind of counteract going second. And now that deck has completely lost that because it just dies. So to me, I don't like that, but it is what it is. We'll see. We'll see how things go, but that's my opinion.
So now that we've had, we'll talk about the buffs in a second, but I don't think they've been. I mean, outside of maybe Black Blood, they haven't been really that consequential. I don't think, and they're all strong,
Oh,
I
they
guess.
have been.
But what do you think? What do you think the meta's been so far? You've been happy with the changes? Do we feel like we're like? Did it feel like expansion release now on Thursday to you? What do you think, Mr. 8?
Yeah, and but I disagree with that the what was it? The obsessive technician buff doesn't matter. It went from
that
like
it matters. I just meant that like it's not like when I said I apologize when I said that I don't mean like I haven't felt like any of the buffs we've seen have like overcome the meta. And now we're just seeing them all the time everywhere. I don't feel like it's like shifted anything in a way that means I'm not saying they're not impactful. I'm just saying that we're not seeing it obsession. We're not seeing 20% Demon Hunter or anything or Death Knight or anything like that. We're seeing they made some decks stronger, but it's not like shifting the meta too much. I don't think.
I'd be cautious about saying something like that because the buffs were to slower control style decks, right? And those decks take a little bit of time to figure out anyway. I mean, like Moonwell's like insane value for 6. Like that's just crazy. And making Black Blood is, I haven't played it. Very good card. Sounds good. I mean, like playing against a priest is a awful experience. It's just like what like it's so difficult to kill them. And there's not a lot of decks that can punch through that. So, people like that playstyle, so good for them for starting to enable it. But I think there might be some key components there that people haven't identified yet. I actually one of somebody. I respond to most messages, both in game. I get friend requests and I get messages on Discord. A lot of people say, "Oh, I recognize you from Bread and Butter." I get that all the time.
Really?
No.
Lies.
Soon
Wow.
enough.
Wow.
But people, no hate. But people, they recognize me. They ask me like deck building questions, which is I love that. That's just like the best for me. And one player said, help me refine Blood DK. And so, I haven't really looked at it, but I did do like a 6-win run in the Brawl. So I was like, let's take a look. And I looked at all the lists and I was like, there's a lot of garbage in here. Like people are playing some really greedy stuff, which I guess is like appealing to that player style. But I'm like, well, let's cut out the Shaladrisil. Let's cut out like some of these like really greedy cards where people are like, oh, I'm playing Control DK and I just explode on 4. It's like, well, half of your curve costs more than 5 mana. Yeah, you're gonna explode on 4 because you don't have any early plays. So, for me, like I take a deck like that and I try to refine it. And the player population is also going to be doing that. I mentioned before, the Careful Caretaker. That card is amazing in Blood DK because what happens in the Herald DK? Because what ends up happening is that again, you're just eating so much of your own life that cards that we just like any life gain that you can get, then you could play your Herald card and just slam the minion you get, and then you're getting 3 minions for 1. But you've got to be careful because you're managing your life total, and the way that you offset that is playing a whole bunch of life gain cards, and people are playing some of them. But this list that I got was like, here's Pyromancer and Poison Breath. I'm like, no, that's not really necessary anymore. But what I'm trying to get at though is the buffs don't seem to matter because they're going into classes that take a while to refine. Right. And like Obsessive Technician is now one of the best cards in that deck. So you build around it, you build around that 4-drop. But I think that this does feel much more like the launch of the expansion. We're seeing several Herald classes making an impact. It's a little bit of a shame that Spell DH is kind of mostly old cards. That's a little bit of a bummer, but we are seeing good Herald cards. We are seeing things like the Shatter cards making a big impact, and we're seeing cards like Confront the Tol'vir still making a really big impact. So definitely feels like Cataclysm is here, and we're feeling the format, in my opinion.
Pylet, thoughts?
Yeah. I guess, yeah, it's, we're kind of in this spot to where I feel like there's a couple decks that were already decent, that, didn't really need to tweak anything. They just took the room that was opened up by Druid disappearing, with the spell DH. The Herald Rogue has, is super popular and doing better than I expected. That deck feels really weird because it feels like it either rolls over or just rolls you. And there's not really much in between, just because it depends on what random stuff you generate. But apparently, it's good enough to be, tier 2. So on average, it feels like the Excavate Rogue, but a little bit, less consistent. So those two kind of filled those spots, and we'll kind of see if or what kind of tones some of that down. But it feels like you can play a lot of different things and be happy, which is not what we had a week ago. So
Agreed. So what are the buffs?
So the buffs that we're talking about, we have Maniacal Follower, which is the rogue stealth herald card. It went from a 3/1 to a 4/1, so it's a 3-mana 4/1 stealth Death Rattle Herald. Obsessive Technician, which Worldeight talked about, is the Death Knight Lifesteal Herald. It is a 3/5 instead of a 2/5 now. Moonwell went from 7 mana to 6 mana. That is from, I believe, from Emerald Dream last year. Emerald Dream or Unguro, I can't read what the thing is, but I think it's Emerald Dream. Deal 4 to all enemy characters, restore 4 health to all friendly characters, so went to 6 mana. And then Black Blood, which is the Priest Colossal. The main body went from a 4/8 to a 5/9. And then the appendages all went from 3 mana 1/2s to 2 mana 2/2s. I don't know how much the mana cost actually affects things other than resuscitate, but maybe there's some reason why that is relevant in the future, so that'll be a thing to keep in mind. But then being 2/2s and be able to trade a little bit or not be traded as easily is definitely super helpful. And they made the comment on the buff side, we've seen some excitement around building decks with these cards, so we're giving them a small boost to help realize their potential. From what I had seen, and Rogue had been experimented with quite a bit. It was just kind of lacking in a couple spots. Same with the Death Knight. These two cards for Priest weren't really being played with a ton, but as soon as they got buffed, they definitely filled those awkward last couple spots in that Control Priest deck, because we had a couple cards we weren't really happy with, and Black Blood slides in really nicely. There are a lot of early lists that, because of the Moonwell buff, we're running Tyrande. From playing it, Tyrande feels like major bait. I'm not sure if Moonwell is or not, but Tyrande felt very, very dead or very counterintuitive, because if you Tyrande and Ruby Sanctum, you're not going to be happy with the outcome. You will do damage and then reheal them. So don't do that. I learned that the hard way. So Moonwell, I think, is good enough, but it's hard to tell.
Moonwell may be good enough, but I've still never seen it played if it wasn't generated. Really, any thoughts on these? I know you already talked about Technician. I know the Rogue card, the 4/1 stealth, better. I mean, it's a good card. It was already a good card. It's a better card. But I don't know. Any other thoughts on those?
No, I mean, I kind of said what I wanted to say there. But yeah, I think a lot of people are just like, the Rogue 3/1 to 4/1, like, what does that matter? But it matters enough. And it's one of those buffs where they've done this in the past. We're getting in this a very, very tiny nudge just to kind of encourage players to check it out again. I can't think of what else comes to mind, but they've done this before. We're trying to restart the meta here. Check this out again. It might be better than you think, and it has been.
I think the
So
most famous version of that is Luna's Pocket Galaxy. Hey guys, play this. We've nerfed it by 2.
So yeah. I kind of already went on a bit of a chat there. So
All right, Pylet, we got any other news?
I do want to chime in on one of them here. I do think the Maniacal Follower buff is very big for that deck, because that deck needs to stay in control the first 5 turns until it starts getting the discounts and starts getting the shenanigans going. And 3-1 didn't trade into anything on turn 3 and 4. 4-1 does. 4-1 trades off almost anything that is on the board at that point, and makes that feel a lot better, because before you had to do a lot of extra work, and now it just cleanly trades all of your 3-4s off. So I do think that was a significant buff for that reason specifically, because of how that deck kind of naturally runs. So where you have an early tempo swing if you get flashback going, or I think it's flashback, the 2 mana card that summons from the past. But after that, it has to kind of just slowly get through turns 3 and 4, and then by the time it gets to turn 5 and 6, it starts to go. So that helps a lot with that. I thought for sure Technician was going to get Rush. That was my guess. They're like, they're going to give it Rush, so that cancels off the 2 that you're spending on the minion you get. But 3/5 works just as well. And like I said, Priest feels better, those kind of filled slots. Still a lot of tweaking to do. Priest is kind of sitting at like a 45% win rate, but haven't looked at specific decks. There's a lot of experimentation, a lot of really bad lists out there. Same with Herald DK is at about 47.5%, but there are a couple lists. There's one list on HS Guru that is significantly above all the others, because it cuts a lot of the Poison Breath and Pyro, and it cuts all the tech cards and everything else, and just kind of plays tempo rather than control, and doing that, and it's 3% higher than every other list. So there's options out there if you're trying to play around with those. For other news, we have the Winter Championship is coming up this next weekend. Yes, Friday, April 10th through the 12th. So we have 4 groups. So day 1 will be groups A and B, day 2 group C and D, and then top 8 on day 3. All those will be streamed. There will be packs as what we've had before. There will be, I believe there is a Choose Your Champion. Yes, there's a Choose Your Champion, and they did add a quick link to that on the community tab of the website, so it's a little bit easier to find. So all that's on there. Speaking of esports, we also did get dates announced for spring and summer. So spring playoffs will be May 15th to 17th, spring championship June 5th through 7th, summer playoff July 17th to 19th, summer championship July 31st to August 2nd. So if those are things you're interested in, you have those dates announced to kind of plan ahead. And then yesterday or 2 days ago, there's a YouTube video posted by Play Hearthstone called Inside the Tavern, where it was a chat with game director Tyler Beelman, final design lead designer Edward Goodwin, and live product lead designer Ryan Hickman. It's about a 17-minute video where they chat about a lot of things. I didn't get a chance to watch this. I know, Tito, you said that you didn't. There is a Reddit summary that is posted. They talked a lot about some of the feedback that people had and opinions people had about the last year, including saying that putting Imbue and Quest back to back was a mistake with 2 major restrictive keywords, and just kind of talking about things that they saw from last year, that these are the things we learned from, these are the things that we're looking to adjust for it. Everyone who I've seen have said that they've watched it has said that it was a very good and positive chat, and they're hoping that they do more of them. But that is out there. Maybe next week we can talk more about it once we've had a chance to watch it.
I'm honestly just happy to hear we have a game director. I keep, forgetting that we have one because he's so non-interactive. So it's good that they're actually out there. Yeah, I was a little distracted this week with things we mentioned before, so I haven't really got to it. And then tonight, I probably could have watched it before the show tonight, but I ended up watching the movie yesterday again, which I love, and then I ended up falling myself into Pitch Perfect, which I'd never seen. So I probably could have better used my time, but I'm enjoying it. Worldeight, did you get a chance to check this out?
Embarrassingly, no. I knew it came out and I had it loaded up, and then something else came up and then I forgot to go back to it. But I definitely want to see it, and I'll be looking at it probably as soon as I can, really.
So you might think we're all being bad podcasters by not watching the content, but we're just wanting to prove that unlike we're just like you, is we also forget to watch it. So it's okay. We have time. We'll watch it before next week. Everyone, your homework is to watch this before next week's episode, and then we can have a nice conversation about it. Yeah. Is there any other news there, Mr. Pylet?
I was just scrolling through to remember if there's anything else in the patch notes that we skipped over. There were a couple wild changes for those of you who play that format. So Romoth, Grandmasters or Romoth, Astral Communion, and Lightspeed all got nerfs, a bunch of battlegrounds changes, and then they did implement the change with Arisen and Onyxia to where you'll now be allowed to pay health cost cards that cost more than your remaining health if you have that active. So that was something that, following the rules, you couldn't, play, if you had 4 health left and you got an 8 mana minion from it, couldn't pay it for health. Now, if you have a Nixie on board, you will be able to do that. They made a rule change for that for that interaction.
And if we're going to talk about Wild, make sure you go check out Born to Be Wild. They have their own podcast, and they talk about all things Wild. And apparently, this is important to Born to Be Wild. Taco Bell is bringing in a butter chicken taco, and I do not understand their obsession with butter chicken. I don't know where it comes from, but this is important. I posted about that, and they were very happy to hear that. So go listen to Born to Be Wild if you're after you listen to Bread and Butter. Cue up Born to Be Wild. It's a great show. You'll love it.
So, with that, we'll get into our main topic this week, which we had planned last week when it was a little bit more relevant, but still feels fairly relevant with Rogue and Demon Hunter right now, and that is mirror matches. So mirror matches feel like one of the things that are one of the most tricky parts of the game, and one of the things that some players absolutely despise and will do anything to avoid if possible. But learning how to navigate them is an important skill. So when we have identical or nearly identical decks, then we have to find other ways to get an edge and an advantage in that. A lot of it does come down to where different types and archetypes of decks have slightly different ways of kind of getting there. So we'll look into those, but a lot of it ends up coming down to a lot of tempo questions, especially for aggressive and mid-range decks. Tempo is really king in mirror matches, and then also a lot of things where you have to kind of take from hand factors into where if you know all the cards that they probably have in their deck, then you kind of know what you have to plan around a little bit more and know to maybe expect this or that from hand, either for buffs, for burn, or for board clears. So Worldeight, you were the one who kind of brought up this topic as we were discussing last week. So I'm going to kind of pass it off to you if there's anything you want to talk about first with it before we jump into different archetypes and approaches.
Yeah, I mean, it's just something that comes up pretty often, because what'll happen is that some decks will stand out as the best, right? And so vast majority of players are going to go to a stat site, say, give me the best list. They're going to run that list. And what happens is that everybody else tends to pick up that list too. So what you're going to see is a lot of, these are my 30 cards, and it's actually pretty likely to be the same 30. maybe the same 28. There's 28 cards shared, but the vast majority of the deck is the same. So the challenge is, okay, is this completely skill? Is this completely random? Like, what's the in between? Because each game between 82 decks is a mix of that. But for me, there's two kind of challenges, right? Like, one player goes first. They're gonna have a huge advantage here. In any kind of mirror match. How do you overcome that discrepancy? Right? Because just going second is generally unfavorable, to different degrees for different decks. But especially if you're playing exactly the same 30, obviously a pretty big challenge to overcome. So what do we do? And the other part of it is that we have to manage what we want to accomplish as our strategy, because even if you're playing the same decks, your strategy, your skill with the deck might be higher, might be lower than your opponent. So you have to make a judgment call. How am I going to win this game if we have all the same cards? And because it's such a common situation, and we kind of just, I think a lot of players just take it as it comes, which is good to a degree. I feel like not a lot of, at least from my viewing of streamers, which are pretty good players, they don't start off the beginning of the game saying like, okay, this is my strategy here, other than I'm just going to kind of play the cards that I'm dealt. So that's one of the main reasons that I wanted to bring it up. But Pylet, I know that you kind of wrote the first draft of this, for show notes and things like that. Is there something that you wanted to speak to first?
Yeah, I think to me for mirror matches, and you kind of mentioned some of the things that you put in there as well. Tempo is king at any card game, but a mirror match especially, tempo becomes so important because typically it's a lot harder to swing the tempo back, because if you make a play to swing tempo in your direction, there's a decent likelihood that they have the exact same card to do the thing back to you, in the next turn or two, to where, you play, this that has rush or a board, you're able to clear the board for cheap and redevelop, and then they just do that right back to you the next turn, and you're right back to square one. So it's really challenging to kind of keep a balance on that, and then decide a spot, especially in aggressive or mid range. Decide, okay, I've done enough of trying to maintain and keep control as long as I can. Now I'm going to work to end the game before they can use any tempo advantage that they have, and find ways to be like, okay, I'm not winning board. Let's push face. Let's end the game and catch them off guard.
So I see we talk about the beatdown earlier on or whatever. Who's the beatdown? So that was one of my key things I want to talk about. We'll talk about that in a minute. But the thing that I always take away from a mirror match, and I will say I'm not the greatest at mirror matches, is again, you have knowledge that they're playing what you're playing for the most part, and that doesn't mean like you're gonna like expect something. They're going to play something that you're not expecting because they've shifted something in. But assuming they have the same cards, you know that, hey, they don't have an answer to what you're doing until turn 5 or something. So, like, taking advantage of that knowledge of saying, well, if I get super aggressive here, I can't take advantage of... I can take advantage of that by, like, hey, if I can put these minions down, and maybe I don't get the value from the battle cry or whatever like that, but if I can get my tempo down early, I know that I can get 15 damage in before they can answer it or something. So those are the kinds of things I try to think about when I'm doing the mirror matches. But yeah.
Yep. So we talk about so tempo here, which is can be kind of it's a bit of a fuzzy topic, right? But fundamentally, you're using your resources more efficiently, which is especially true when you have the same 30. right? Like the way that you play your cards, if you're getting 2-for-1s all the time, you're probably going to win the matchup. You're going to make it very, very difficult for your opponent to find the win. And so we have to plan a bit for it. The other thing that comes with that is most decks have some kind of swing mechanism in them. You know, a lot of decks have AoE. Some decks just have a really strong play, like their Colossus, for example. And the timing of that is very important because this is probably, you know, most Hearthstone games are still somewhere around 8 to 10 turns. You know, it's a fast format. Don't get me wrong. It's actually faster than what we were seeing before. But you know, we do have a chance to get to our colossals generally, and so we have to plan. Like, do we find it? Do we just slam it, or do we press this? You know, maybe we have a small advantage, and we want to keep pressing that. And you know, the colossal or something, our swing card will be the uppercut. On the other hand, if we're behind a bit, you know, do we try and mitigate any losses that we have and then use that colossal to kind of swing the game? So the swing cards are also very important. Usually the decks only typically have, you know, a handful of them. That's not including random generation of things like that. But built into deck, there's pretty typically some swing cards. So finding them and using them efficiently is absolutely critical. So going into the matchup, one of the most important things, if you keep queuing this over and over again, is to know the deck. Know what cards are the most important ones, because every deck has very important cards, some pretty good cards, and then some filler. Like, there are decks where you're like, oh, like I feel like I can't cut anything from the 30, but most decks definitely have the 6 worst cards, the 10 worst cards. Knowing that, and trackers now help a lot with that. If you decide to use those, you know, they give you a mulligan and say, you know, toss this garbage. But it's important to know why like these cards are not important, or you want better cards, and that's gonna matter based on the matchup too. So there are matchups where you might have some rush, right? Like that's a pretty big one in a mirror, is kind of who plays their rush card last. We are still kind of fresh out of, I would say, the last meta enough that I could talk about Ziliax, right? Where it was who played their Divine Shield Ziliax second, because that was the swing back. So even if you swung the game with one player swung the game, whoever played it second, right, was swinging it right back into their advantage. Now we have something similar, but with the colossals. All the colossals are different, but I would say one of the most important, you know, some of the most important ones are like Sinestra or Onyxia. Sinestra in particular, like you can have this, you play it and then you just have this kind of like a pop-off turn. Because you get to do all the double spells that are often discounted. Maybe they're discounted enough that you can play for free, things like that. So going into the matchup, before we start anything, know what cards are the good cards, why they're the good cards. You know, we mentioned, are they high tempo? Can we do several things at the same time with them? Identify what your strongest swing cards are, try to find those. But, you know, you only can find so many cards within a matchup, so you do have to use what you're given. But it is important to know, you know, going in, before you draw anything, what are the most important cards, especially for the mirror. So that's a bit of study on going into it.
So like we said earlier before, like you try to get tempo to out tempo the mirror if you can, but like what you said right there is mirrors always feel like a giant game of chicken to me. It's like who, like you're trying to put your Zilliax is probably the perfect example because that was always like the biggest one over the last 2 years. Is like you want to put your opponent in a position where they have to play their Zilliax before you, and it was always like you're trying to bait theirs out before you can bait yours out, and the other 2 or 3 big bombs you have that might swing the game, and is always like, yes, how do I answer that? How do I get them to play that so I can answer that? And it's always just like I said, it's just like this game of chicken. They're coming at each other and who's going to veer off the road first. And that usually really defines the game right there. Pylet, any thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree with a lot of that. It's definitely, know your swing cards, know your deck, because it, especially in mirror matches, knowing the deck best is one of the bigger, differences in that, to where, it's going to be, it's probably going to be very clear if it's someone who's on their 5th game of the deck compared to their 50th game of the deck if they queue into each other. Just because the person with more reps knows what cards to look for and knows more of the play patterns, more naturally to be able to do that. Not saying that you can't have a good idea early on, but it is definitely, something that comes with time.
Yeah, agreed. So one of the other things, Pylet, that you noted here is going first. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that? What your thoughts were for how to compensate for the coin difference? Because that's pretty big.
Yeah, I think, it's something that comes up in a lot of decks. I feel like especially the past year, there's been a lot of discussion of the go first difference, to where just being on coin in this, more, as they go to a more board based, less, big things from hand, meta and whatnot, it's a lot more challenging when you're going second, and then especially when all the cards are the same, feels a little bit more difficult even on top of that. So that's where you have to look for something that's going to turn the game in your favor, or really be ready to capitalize on as soon as your opponent has a slow turn. So, because there is a chance, even in the mirror, that your opponent bricks an early turn, and you've got to find the way to absolutely capitalize on that. And if you do that, then you're going to be in a very, very good spot. If you're in the Herald Shaman mirror and they hero power on 2, you're feeling really good if you have a Herald card. So you've taken a huge step forward in that. Now that's kind of a interesting one, because there's so much rush and whatnot in that deck that it's board control. Early boards don't matter quite as much, but chip damage certainly does in that deck. And if you can get that early chip damage, then it helps get that going. But finding ways to do that, and then finding the best use that you can for coin, especially once you get your mulligan and your opening hand, deciding, am I coining something early to swing tempo, or do I have enough these first few turns I can save it for a turn 4, a turn 5 bigger play, and slam an early colossal or an early whatever that's going to be a bigger tempo swing, rather than me trying to take the early board from them and fight back from turn 1 or 2.
Yeah, I think so. We've kind of like mixed things a little bit. I think maybe we should break it down a little bit between like what's the difference between like a control mirror versus like an aggro mirror, because I think that's kind of a pretty different, or a mid-range mirror if you want to use that term. And I think that's ahead in the show notes a little bit, but I think those are 3 different things that like you have to approach them a little differently, right? It's not like you're not going to approach an aggro mirror the same way that you would approach a control mirror. Or would you?
Yeah, no, I mean that's good, right? Like the faster the matchup, the bigger the difference between going first and going second is, right? This is especially true with board based aggro decks, right, that are focused all about on early board, that might not have rush mechanics like the Herald Shaman, maybe more like your token druid if you're playing something like that. And you really need to find those small windows of opportunity where you can capitalize, and sometimes you just can't. That's like the sad part of it, right? Like, you just have to do your best to mitigate the damage, and you just, everybody gets the coin 50% of the time, and so you gotta do your best to hold in there, hang on in the aggro matchups, and on the other side of it, when you go first, absolutely capitalize. Do everything you can to pressure your opponents. This is going a little bit into mulligan strategy, where it's super important to know your mulligans. Cards that are going first, like pretty decent, might be terrible going second. Like, generally, like if you have like a decent 2-drop going first, you're pretty happy. You're like, this is better than a hero power. Going second, it's awful. Like, if it's just like an average 2-drop, you need to be fishing for something impactful. Hopefully you find a good 2-drop. Maybe you find a 3-drop you can coin. But you gotta do better than just average going second. I think for combo, again, it's also like who goes first is just such an enormous advantage. That one turn difference. If you got the same kill turn, let's say it's like turn 7, turn 8, you just lose. You just lose. Like, it's awful. There's not much you can do except know your deck, assemble your combo pieces as fast as you can, and go for it. But it's just an unfortunate circumstance of just it's really hard to balance that going first, going second, other than everybody gets the same share of it. Where I think it's also that going first, going second gets a lot less important is in the control matchups. I honestly can't really speak to that too well, but when the game goes to like 10 turns, 15 turns, 20 turns, whatever it is, the swings still matter, but you have more time to get to them. The coin difference feels a lot less, and that's a lot about assembling your resources, knowing what the win condition is, denying your opponent's win condition. It's actually kind of simpler. Like, the two extremes are kind of simpler. Like, you just pedal to the metal with aggro and combo, and control is focus all on resource gathering and spending that efficiently. Where I think this gets really interesting, right, is like the mid-range kind of decks. Those decks that are, might have some early game plan, but they don't really qualify as like a control. Like, they definitely have like a game plan that gets pretty stronger, turns 5 through 8, something like that. They're really, against aggro, they turn the corner. Against control, they're trying to kill them still before control completely locks them out. And so I want to talk a little bit about Who's the Beatdown here. So Who's the Beatdown is a pretty famous article written by Mike Flores almost like 30 years ago, which is kind of crazy for Magic the Gathering. And what he talks about, if you're not familiar with the concept, is that when two players sit down and play each other in a card game like this, one of them is going to win eventually, right? That's kind of the theory. The simple theory is there's an eventuality to one of the players. Typically, this is like a control deck, something like that, right? And so the role of the beatdown is to close out the game before that eventuality happens. That's the simple version is, all right, I'm the aggro deck, I'm the beatdown. It gets a little muddier when two mid-range decks encounter each other, right? And that's, okay, maybe I'm like a deck that wants to win on turn 8, and my opponent is a deck that wants to win on turn 9. Very, very close edge, but one of them has I am more likely to win the longer this game goes on. So these are two different decks, right? You can still kind of identify who's the beatdown, It depends a bit on the draw, but it is generally something that you can look at the meta, you can look at the matchup spreads, things like that, and kind of make a decision early on in the game. In a mirror matchup, who's the beatdown becomes really muddy because you have the same 30 cards. The coin is the difference, and what you draw is the difference. So you don't have that clear knowledge and ability to identify who's the beatdown. Generally, what you need to know about your own deck is this deck intended to go long? Is this deck, do I want to go long? Do I want to go really fast? Maybe. Is it a deck that is stronger in the early game than the later game? This also defines how you mulligan, what that looks like as you're going through the game. But it will become, in my opinion, it becomes kind of clear along the way, like who is trying to push that chip damage in, who is trying to keep their opponent on the back foot, right? Like if you get an opponent down to somewhere 10 health or less, you're really threatening them. It's very difficult to do your best game plan when you're always kind of in the red zone. So it does kind of develop over the game. But you need to, the whole time, as it comes, start to develop that, go from the unclearness of who's the beatdown and kind of make a decision, right? I'm going to try and pursue this for this turn, the next turn, and maybe the following turn, to try and push towards this. You have to make a commitment there. You can't, or if you make a commitment, I think you're going to have an advantage, in my opinion. And saying, all right, I'm a rogue. I'm going to focus on finding Foxy Fraud into Flashback. Not going to worry about all my Herald cards, maybe the good ones. The decks can go very, very long, right? Like the rogue decks can go for a long time. But maybe I'm just going to kill them with an early flashback, and that'll be better. So based on that, then you just put the gas down, put the pedal down until they challenge you otherwise. Or maybe you decide, I've got all the tools right now to handle an early game, and I've got some of my greedier stuff. I'm going to go with that. But you still make that decision. All that being said, right, we talk about the swing cards again. So once one player plays their swing cards, right, that could flip. That could totally flip. Who is now pressuring, now putting their opponent on the back foot, and who's trying to close out the game faster. So this will change over the course of any game. But I think it's especially true to be able to identify that in these mirror matchups. Because again, like, it doesn't really, like, if you're playing an aggressive deck against a control deck and they clear your board, you're still the beatdown. It doesn't matter that they play their big swing card. You're still going for it. Where in this, you might say, okay, they cleared my board. Do I still have to push, finish what I started? Or can I somehow pivot to something else? There's not really an answer here. But you do want to make a decision based on what's going on, form a strategy, put that strategy into the tactics that you're playing, and just keep it in mind. Keep it in mind if you're trying to close the game out or not, and make those plays. You still want to play for tempo, things like that, but let your strategy kind of form. And all that being said, here's the crazy thing, is that you can be both the beatdown and the one with eventuality. It doesn't have to be either or. That's the absolute crazy, especially with these mid-range decks, right? We've seen this plenty of times in the past where there was like a really good hunter deck. Right now, actually, kind of like the no-hand hunter kind of has this too with the Tolvir. Like, has a ton of early pressure, and they play Confront the Tol'vir, and all of a sudden it's a full reload, right? And that deck can go long because of that. So it's possible to be both. But all that being said, what I'm trying to emphasize here, long rant, apologies, is identify your role in the matchup. It's a mirror, so it's not going to be clear before you start the game, but identify it as soon as you can and form your strategy around it.
And I think one thing kind of to go along with that is understand you know what your win condition is. So you want to not only reach your win condition, but prevent your opponent from hitting their win condition. I think a really good example of this was Odin Warrior. Is in order to win that matchup, you had to play Odin, or that was a thing. So even in the mirror matches, your goal was to one, get yourself in a position where you could safely play your Odin, so then you can do the things the next turn. But at the same point, you wanted to pressure your opponent so they didn't have the opportunity to play Odin. So then you could continue, like if they play Odin, they lose. So they're going to have to do other things to deal with your board. And that gives you the opportunity to either tempo out your Odin or to whatever. So I think that's another big component of what we're talking here is aside from like, hey, I understand I have to be quicker or I have to like play my cards last or whatever like that. It's like, how do they win? How do I stop them from winning with the tools that I have, knowing what I know?
Yeah, I just really quick want to say that's excellent to bring it into like a real example. I was being really fuzzy, but that's such a terrific example of that. So thanks for that.
Yeah, no, that's one that stands out to me for because it's like a lot of times it's like, hey, who played your Aviana first or Ariana, whatever the name was, or who played your any of them big win con cards. It's like, who plays it first? How do you stop them from playing it and get your own? Before I have another question, but before I do, Pylet, I don't want to distract you. What are your thoughts on that?
No, if you have a question, go ahead. I'll come back to the mid-range decks here after your question.
Well, so we know. So let's take a look at what we just talked about. Is that we were just in a place where the play rate of Imbue Druid was insane. So it's a mirror match. So then, and if I'm gonna play, if my decision is to play Imbue Druid or whatever the hot deck of the moment is, and I'm playing against that a significant amount of times, how do I then plan on teching versus that? So I don't want to necessarily go with the same 30 because I know I'm going to see this match sometimes. So how do I tech myself so I can get an advantage in that matchup while still staying, I guess, true to the heart of the deck? That's, I think, something we should be talking about as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. I was going to bring that up in a bit if I had remembered. I did put it in the show notes. But yeah, really great question. Let's loop back to that in a bit.
Yeah. So I'm going to type it in before all three of us forget. But I think looking at like the current decks, the Herald Shaman sticks out most to me for a more mid-range deck that has a lot of decisions on when you change that speed and when you change your game plan, because you can very easily go very aggressive and go very wide early on, and then it's also very quick and easy to pivot to, well, they cleared my board, I did a bunch of chip damage, now we're going to use hammer and kill them from hand, with that in avatar form. Or, okay, now I've got that for some chip damage. I've got my Alakir in hand, so that's going to bail me out when they swing the board. When I take turn 6 off to equip the hammer and they swing the board, I've got Alakir coming up, or I've got a discounted Deathwing coming up because I played all Traxian. And I feel like that's the mirror that tension and switching back and forth definitely comes up quite a bit, and I've definitely felt that to where I had a mirror yesterday, I think, where I built a board super quickly. I got a couple more early Herald cards than they did, so I just was able to go wide. I snowballed a Wailing Vapor and just hit them for 5 turns, and then got to the point to where about turn 5, they are able to swing back because they hit their rush and whatnot. But I had hammer in hand, so I was able to threaten off board, and they had to try to play an Elise or something to bail them out and waste 4 mana looking for an answer that didn't come. And being able to find those little things and kind of know ahead of time, like, this is what I'm going to do if this happens and I can't win through plan A. This is where I'm going for plan B, and try to set yourself up for it to where, maybe turn 4, you're playing, Xavius to look for Muradin or to look for Altraxian rather than playing a couple 2-drops or, something like that. It's like, I'm going to guarantee that I look for this because I've already got enough tempo. Now I need to build up my next plan just in case.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of a momentum. But yeah, forming a game plan, very very important there, and identifying right where you can find the win. That's generally a skill that we all want to develop, is looking for our win condition. It's one of the things that'll really step up a player's game is finding that, because sometimes you're like, okay, this is just kind of like the typical play and you do this, but if you do those typical plays, you might be going down a road where you just eventually lose because they're all kind of typical but low tempo, or they're not going towards a victory plan. That's kind of all like a bigger discussion. I think we could probably talk a little bit about teching for the mirror now, right? Which was a great question that Tito had. And right, so we've identified, we've done our homework. Hopefully, we've made a decision. I have an edge, or maybe I can't establish an edge. I keep going 50-50 into the mirror, which is really not like anything awful. It just a mirror is, being 50-50 is pretty reasonable. And so now instead of the same 30, I want to, add 2 cards. I want to add maybe more than that. This again goes to understanding the deck in and out. If you are just putting this in your rotation, that's totally fine. But I wouldn't try to mess around too much with tech cards for the mirror unless it's a significant part of the field. We just had that with Imbue Druid, but anything that's like higher than 25% play rate, like, so Rogue is starting to approach that right now at top ranks. Not too surprising. It's a good deck. It's a fun deck. It's an interesting deck. Not sure how you tech on that one. Is so much randomness, but the point is, if you're seeing enough of any particular matchup, what do you need to do? And understanding your own game plan, understanding your own deck. The important thing is to maybe identify weaknesses in that deck. As I mentioned before, there's typically 6 to 8 cards that are the worst cards. There has to be. You got 30 cards that are all going to be equal weight. And so what do we want to fiddle around with? For practical advice, right? Like, you can use these aggregate stat websites. You go in there, you put in your archetype, opponent, so like I'm playing Imbue Druid, opponent Druid. And you could search for what are the most like highest drawn rate cards in that, and you can understand what are the biggest cards. And a lot of them are just like the most powerful cards. But it might surprise people to say, oh, this card that I thought was generally good in this deck is actually not important in the mirror, right? And so maybe you can cut that. You'd be sacrificing games maybe elsewhere. But you can, filter down quite a bit. Some of these sites let you filter down to like 100 games, so something like that. I'll do that for inspiration. or I'll take a look at other similar decks that aren't the mirror matchup, but kind of have the same relationship with that deck, and I'll do the same thing. Opponent, Druid, see what's good, and sometimes it'll surprise you. Maybe Royal Librarian is the key to the mirror for whatever reason. Like you just seeing tons of Egg Warrior mirrors. You know, who knows what things will look like, right? You put some Royal Librarians in. You have to sacrifice some matchups elsewhere, but it's not too hard with the stat websites to identify the worst cards in the class or in the deck, or the archetype in general. Consider cutting them, and then consider being kind of creative to finding where you might also find more powerful cards to fit your edge in. I wouldn't tweak it too much, to be honest, but yeah, I think you could probably play around with 2 to 4 slots in that regard.
I try to also think like, when I lose with this deck, what do I lose to? And if it's like, oh, if it's when my opponent plays Demolition Renovator, then maybe think about teching that in. Or if it may not be a 1-to-1 translation, but it's like, I always lose when my opponent finds a way to handle this situation, and then I can't gain the tempo back or the stats back. So then maybe I can't do it the same way that the warrior does it to me, but maybe how do I do it? What's the closest thing I can come to in the class I'm playing, and try to the easiest way to beat a deck is to play a deck and know how it loses, right? So you know how it loses when you lose with it. So take those experiences and say, well, then how can I turn that into a positive for me in the mirror? I think that's kind of a good approach to it.
Yeah, and it's definitely something that Worldeight kind of alluded to where teching for the mirror can be a dangerous experiment. Depending on what the actual play rate is, to where, if you're getting into that 25, 30, 40% play rate, then you can start to consider it a lot more. Or, if you're not playing ladder and playing, conquest, then yeah, you definitely want to look for those edges. That's where you see a lot of different card choices when we see these master tours and everything, because they're looking at specific matchups and possibly teching for a mirror because they're planning to ban this and expecting theirs not to be banned, and we see some customs enforcers come out and whatnot. So so yeah, and there's also going to be decks where it's difficult to find those cards that you can easily swap. I'm thinking for Imbue Druid. I don't know what I would have changed to help in the mirror with the cards that we have in standard, and with the deck limitation that has of having to run nature spells. So you can't throw in something else that might help you if it doesn't have a nature tag on the spell, to where it's sometimes it's a little bit trickier depending on the deck compared to some of the other mid-range decks. Like the Shaman has a few flex cards, so where you can swap a Hex, you can swap a Lightning Storm, you can swap a Witch's Apprentice. You have some easier bottom 6 cards to play around with.
It's actually Imbue Druid, you say that, but it's the coming into the release of the expansion, the first iterations of Imbue Druid were Bitterbloom Knights, Flutterwing Guardians, things like that. Like it was looking a lot like the old deck. And then players started noticing that a really tough matchup was Token Druid, right? Like a Druid within Druid, and you're like, man, I'm like, players were identifying like, I'm losing to Hatchery Helpers. Like that's brutal. Wait, I can run Hatchery Helpers. Like,
Yeah.
So that was actually like, that started off as tech for the mirror, right? Like somebody took that opportunity, or maybe many people took that opportunity to identify the token cards are really good in the mirror. So we're going to start running the token cards. And they ended up being good all across the board. But the first iterations didn't have the helpers. I remember being like really surprised when someone played against me, like, why is this Imbue Druid? Like, what's Hatchery Helper doing here? But that's where that comes in. That creativity came in, and it made a big impact on the deck. So don't be afraid to swing for the fences sometimes.
Yeah, that makes sense. By the time that I got back from my trip, that innovation had already happened, and it was just Token Druid and Imbue Druid were like 10 cards apart, if that, from each other.
Yeah, it was interesting where it's like there were 3 druids in the first week. It was Token Druid, Treant Druid, and Imbue Druid. And they were all the winning percentages were all like within 2% of each other. They were all really, really strong decks. Yet Imbue Druid had like a 23% play rate, and Token Druid had a 0.7% play rate, and Treant Druid had a 0.4% play rate. And it's like, why is everyone playing Imbue Druid when these other 2 druids are just about as good and a little more interesting? But what are you gonna do? So anybody have any final thoughts on this before we wrap the show up?
No,
Worldeight?
not really. I think that it's just something to the basics are there still, just as anything else. Know your deck, play for tempo. But I just want to stress my argument as one of the most important things that you can to get an advantage is form a strategy as the game goes on. Try to commit as much as you can to that strategy. Pylet gave several examples of committing to a strategy of getting enough chip damage in so that damage from hand would be enough. But that was identifying that, right? Like identifying that on turns 3, 4, where you're like, all right, I've got enough of a board advantage here. I know I'm probably going to lose it at some point. They've got a million rushers they haven't played yet, but I can get them down to 8. Or I'm not sure whatever number it was, but like something like that is to still develop a strategy, because I'm guessing your opponents probably don't. I would say even top players don't. From at least from the streamers that I've seen. Not that's true for everybody, but a lot of players are just kind of playing their cards as they get them. And I would say focus on a strategy, play your cards as much as you can to support that. But don't ever sacrifice tempo for it. That's just still way too important. But if you can, push towards a specific goal.
And if you're seeing, if you feel like you're losing more, or your stats are saying you're losing more in the mirror than you're winning, look at those games. What is your opponent doing that you're not? And then incorporate that into what you're doing, because clearly they're probably working on the mirror a little more than you are. And it could be just variance and luck, but there's usually probably something like, hey, maybe I should be playing this card without worrying about getting the full value from the battle cry, or having the other card that goes with it to follow it up with. It might be just simple as just tempo it down and go push face.
Yeah.
A lot of time that's the answer, right? Punch him in the face.
So it is also fair in those cases to double check how many times you've been on coin in the mirror. Generally it's 50-50, but sometimes those coin go second games are more mirrors than the others, to where if you're like, okay, yeah, I've gone 50-50 obviously on the coin, but 8 of my 10 mirror matches have been on the coin, and I've lost a lot of them, and this might be why. So just that's part of the variance. To then you can kind of identify, it's just like, okay, I was at even more of a disadvantage. This is what I did to overcome it. This is what I can try to do. A couple things that we kind of skimmed over, just because the mid-range matchups generally have more for mirror matches that you have to look at. Aggro we kind of talked about. I do think in aggro it is sometimes important to kind of look at how you're using your from hand damage, especially if you've determined that you've had to be the control in the matchup, because you can definitely find a spot depending on what you have. I'm thinking like the no hand hunter mirror, depending on what you have in hand. As if I've got to confront the Tolvir in hand, I'm going to start kind of figuring out, okay, what do I have to send into minions to stay alive? What can I start to send face to, flip the switch here on turn 5? And that's going to depend on, do I have wound praise? Do I have arcane shots? Do I have rocks? What do I have? What's in there? To where can I ignore this minion because Tolvir is going to take care of it in a couple turns, and now I'm going to be set up better? Or do I have to take care of it? Because if I don't, I'm going to lose the game. And sometimes you pick wrong, and that's okay.
And
Yep.
and with that, like you're saying, like you have to, like we talked a lot about like the control matchup where it's like, well, who plays their Ziliax first or who plays that first? If your best play is to play a card, play the card. I mean, if otherwise, they may not have Ziliax. It may be halfway through their deck, and if you don't play yours, then you're not giving yourself a chance to win, and you're just giving them time to find the answer and stuff like that. So obviously, there's a give and take when you need to do that, not to do that. But if your best play is to do something, probably do it, and then you're going to win or lose these matchups. It's how it works. But don't not play something if it's like your best option and like, well, because eventually they might have this card, and we just play the cards, and if they have it, they have it.
Yeah. Control mirrors. I know none of us are really control players as much as this priest is trying to turn me into one. But generally speaking, control mirrors resources are key more than tempo. To where finding that edge on resources without falling too far behind, obviously, kind of gauge your clears, what can you ignore, what can the general control good play, but also finding okay, I know that they're going to clear this, but now I have this way that I can get an extra minion or an extra board. Maybe you discovered an extra Yasandra, and if it was the Yasandra Warrior Mirror, you discovered an extra one off of a Dark Gift or whatever, and knowing that might be part of the key, because you know that they're going to clear the first couple boards, but board 3 they don't have an answer for. Finding those kind of resources, and then combo we kind of talked about a little bit of, that's very much just kind of all gas, find your pieces, but also sometimes you can make your combo a turn faster by saying, you know what, I've got some tempo, I've got some pressure, let's get chip damage in that they're not going to be able to heal from, and then I don't have to wait till turn 7. Turn 5 with a half combo is going to be enough, and you turn more into a burn deck maybe instead of a combo deck. But kind of finding that to kind of cancel out, especially if you know that you're going second and you're going to be at that turn disadvantage.
Fair enough. All right, so wrapping this show up, Worldeight. I've asked you a lot of questions over the days. So the question of the week this time is, what is your favorite comfort movie or show? Like, it's you just want to chill out, this comes on the TV, or you kind of scroll by it, or you just need something to kill time with. What's something you would throw on that you like?
It's so it's kind of two different answers there. Just for like background, I would say something like the kids cartoons that are really kind of for adults at the same time. Something like Avatar, The Last Airbender, or I really liked Gravity Falls, stuff like that. That are just kind of like simple humor, but there's still some like adult themes in there. But if it's like late at night and I'm just kind of like hanging out, a lot of times I'll actually put on Mystery Science Theater 3000, because if you're not familiar with the show, basically they take old movies that are really bad and they make fun of them. They're the annoying people in the movie theater that are talking over the movie. That's the premise of the show. So the movies are awful. You don't have to follow the plot. The jokes are pretty solid. Sometimes they're not, but who cares? You just move on, and they're movies. So you put them on, and it's like hour and a half or something like that. Probably one of my favorite things to put on. And I've got a few a few of them that are my favorites. But yeah, I would say it's two different kind of moods that I'm in. But good question. Thank you.
A friend, when I was my freshman year in college, a band that formed that was mostly people that lived on my floor in my dorm. They named their band the Mitchells after a movie that was reviewed by Mystery Science Theater 3000. So it's kind of funny. But yeah, no, good calls. So if you'd like to support the show, you can do so by joining our Patreon over at patreon.com/breadandbutterhs. You get access to the raw audio early. You access the members' channels on Discord. You get to help shape the show with asking questions of our future guests or suggesting guests. And if you'd like to help us in a non-financial way, you can let people know about the show and let us know how we're doing. You can give us a 5-star review on Spotify. If you can find a way to go over to Apple Music and give us a review there, that's always positive as well. But the best thing you can do is just let people know about the show. If you have a friend that plays Hearthstone, say, hey, you should listen to Bread and Butter. It might help you get better, especially when we have guests like Worldeight on. Worldeight, is there anything, where can people find you on social media?
Good question. So I'm most active on Discord and the various Hearthstone channels, but you can also try and reach me at the direct message, simply Worldeight. I don't really do much other socials, but I will occasionally stream Worldeight_HS. It's kind of just whenever I've got the time for it. Don't expect a regular schedule there.
Love to have you come co-stream with me at some time. We can do a little something. Pylet, where can people find you on social media?
You can find me Pylet712, that's Pylet, on Twitter and Blue Sky. Don't post there much, but I do exist on those platforms. And then also on Discord and a bunch of various Hearthstone Discords and the Bread and Butter Discord.
And you can find me on all the Discords and Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and TikTok at titosantanahs, especially YouTube. We've been putting a lot of videos out there and trying to make things happen. You can also usually find me at the Crossroads with Tartarus, depending on what I'm doing. And Worldeight, you got anything like to promote or shout out this week?
Yeah, one of the things that I took my boys to is something called We Rock the Spectrum Kids Gym. It's pretty awesome. It's run by 2 occupational therapists. It's kind of like an indoor play area, but they have a lot of things that are specifically for kids on the spectrum, which, it's awesome to have a place like that. It's just kind of a cool indoor gym in general, but as a parent of someone who is not really on the spectrum, but is in occupational therapy for that kind of work, it's just incredible to have a place like that that's local, and I love their mission as to what they're going to do, and the place is just excellent.
Pylet?
Yeah, gonna first shout out the Hearthstone team for putting out that I forget what they called it now, the tavern video, Inside the Tavern. Something that's really, really nice, kind of, feels like it's reaching back to the days when we had, Ixar, kind of just leading random Twitter Q&As and whatnot, and just kind of giving us the behind the scenes, something that we've been missing for quite a few years, and I think is very appreciated that it's coming back. So shout out to that. And then also shout out to THL for the season starting up. Meant to do this a couple weeks ago, and then I was gone and forgot about it. But if you're interested in kind of a somewhat competitive side, they're always looking for subs, and that's a great way to kind of get your feet wet and jump in and find teams later on. But they've done a nice job. We've got some new board members, including friend of the show, Electric Sheep City, and I think that they've done a nice job. We've got some more teams this year, and they do fantastic work over there.
Don't forget Talon Knife.
Yes. I knew that there's 3 new board members this year. I couldn't remember who the other 2 were off the top of my head. I forgot about May. Sorry, May.
And I'm going to shout out, I think, Ridiculous Hat this week. Not because of anything Hearthstone, but just that in his new position at Illustrials, however you say it, he seems to be really thriving, and it seems like that's a nice, big, growing community, and that he has an active role in it. And it's just to see how things went with him over at Hearthstone and see the passion that he put into things. And our loss is their gain, and to just see him thriving in the role he has is really good. And we miss him over here, but it is what it is, and congratulations. I'm glad he's doing well and thriving, and hopefully that continues on and that game has lots of success, and so does he. But anyway, guys, I think we're toast. We'll see you.
All right,
Bye.
see ya.